Okay, so the second video about electronic oscillators is all about non-sinusoidal or relaxation oscillator. Non-sinusoidal or relaxation oscillators are circuits in which voltage and current changes abruptly from one value to another and which continues to oscillate between these two values as long as DC power is supplied to it. Usually, non-sinusoidal or relaxation oscillators use an RC timing circuit and a device that changes states to generate a specific waveform. So, non-sinusoidal or relaxation oscillators generate any waveforms whose shape is different from that of a standard sine wave. So, the different types of non-sinusoidal waveforms that can be produced by relaxation oscillators are square wave, rectangular wave, sawtooth wave, triangular waveforms, and pulses. So we have here an example. So this is a sawtooth waveform. This is a triangular waveform. So these are pulses. These are square wave. Actually, square wave, rectangular wave, and pulses differs from each other regarding the sizes of their space and mark. Okay, so this is what we call the space. So in this example, we have here our space, which is 4 microseconds, and we have this as our mark, which is 1 microsecond. So we have pulses if the spaces are wider compared with mark. We have a square wave if the space and the marks are equal. And we have rectangular when your mark is wider compared to your space. So we have different terms here regarding our mark and space. Okay, so we have what we call MSR. So MSR is equivalent to or means mark to space ratio. So MSR is pulse width, okay, divided by time between pulses. Okay, so pulse width is your mark, time between pulses is your space. So from the given example or figure a while ago, we have there our space to be 4 microsecond and our mark to be 1 microsecond. So for us to solve for your MSR, this is simply equivalent to 1 microsecond divided by 4 microsecond, which will give us 0.025, or we will be having a ratio equivalent to 1:4. Okay, so usually the mark and space is being used from early Morse code transmission system where a pulse was used to cause a pen to mark the paper. So that's why it is called mark and space. Okay, then we have the pulse repetition time. So pulse repetition time is the time between the beginning of one pulse and that of the other. So in our example, okay, so if we have, for example, we have here your mark and then we have here your space. Okay, so this is for microsecond and this is 1 microsecond. So pulse repetition time is the time between the beginning of one pulse. So this is the beginning of your pulse and that of the other, and this is the beginning of your second pulse. So in this example, our PRT is equivalent to 5 microsecond. Okay, and then lastly, we have pulse repetition frequency. Okay, so pulse repetition frequency is the number of pulses per second. Actually, PRF and PRT are related. Okay, wherein your PRF is equivalent to 1 all over your PRT. So your PRF or pulse repetition frequency is equivalent to 1 all over 5 microsecond, and that will be in terms of 20 kilohertz. Okay, so pulse repetition time is in terms of seconds, while pulse repetition frequency is equivalent to hertz. Okay, so as we all know, frequency is equivalent to 1 all over time or period is equal to 1 all over our frequency. So we have here pulse definitions. Okay, so due to capacitive effects in a transistor or to circuit elements external to it, our input pulse, okay, or our output pulse does not directly follows our input. So as you can see here, if this is our input pulse, our output pulse ideally also follows our input pulse like this one, okay, but in reality, because of capacitive effects, okay, so this the input and the output is not actually equal, okay. So let us first define the following terms. So what are these terms we are regarding pulses? Okay, so we have the time delay. So what do we mean by time delay or TD? So time delay is the time interval between the beginning of the input pulse and the time the output voltage or current reaches 10% of its maximum value. So it is expected that if we have, for example, an input waveform like this, at the output side, the moment we have an input, we also have an output already. Okay, but we have what we call time delay. Okay, so this is the interval between the beginning of the input pulse and the time the output voltage or current reaches 10% of its maximum value. And then when we say rise time or TR, this is the time taken by the output voltage or current to rise from 10% to 90% of its maximum value. So it's not really, we have an input and then you have your output right away. So we have what we call the turn on time, okay? And the turn on time is equal to the sum of your time delay and your rise time, or T on is equivalent to TD plus TR. Okay? So at the end, okay, so at the other side or at the other part of your pulse, we have what we call the storage time. So the storage time is the time interval between the end of the input pulse or the trailing edge and the time when the output voltage or current falls to 90 degrees of its initial maximum value. So it is not really happening that if we don't have an input already, we already have no output. Okay, so sometimes even though our input is already equal to 0, still there is still a remaining output, and that is because of what we call the storage time. So this allows your output signal to fall from 90 degrees of its initial maximum value. So that is still the storage time. And then we have a fall time. So the fall time is the time interval during which the output voltage or current falls from 90% of its maximum value to 10%. And your turn off time is equal to the sum of the storage time and your fall time, or T off is equivalent to TS plus TF. Okay, then we have the pulse width. So it is the time duration of the output pulse measured between 250 levels of the rising and falling waveform. So that is your definition for your pulse width. Okay, so the first type of relaxation oscillator that we will discuss is what we call sawtooth generator. So how do we produce sawtooth waves? Okay, so the essential requirements of a sawtooth generators are the following. So we need a DC source, we need a switching device. Okay, so before switching devices are that can be used are neon tube or vacuum tubes. However, these are already obsolete. Okay, then we have thyristors and UJT. Okay, so these are types of these are other semiconductor devices after that transistors. Okay, so you will be discussing this type of components or semiconductor devices when you go to industrial electronics. Okay, and then of course we will be using the capacitor and we will be using your resistor. Okay, so for sawtooth generator, it is somewhat it has somewhat a VI characteristics of slow charging. Okay, so it should have a slow charging effect. Okay, so slow charging and then fast discharge, slow charging and then fast discharge, slow charging and then fast discharge. So if we do that continuously, we can form a sawtooth waveform. Okay, so the characteristics, the voltage current characteristics of our RC circuit, since we have an RC circuit here, so the voltage current characteristics of your RC circuit plays an important role in the operation of such a generator. Okay, so by restricting the time interval equal to the time constant, okay, so our formula for time constant is equivalent to the resistance value multiplied by the capacitor. Okay, only the rising portion of the characteristic, so the rising portion is from point O to point A, which is almost a straight line when utilized. Okay, so we're going to design such a circuit that will have that specific function: slow charging, fast discharge. Okay, so for periods of time greater than the time constant, okay, the rising portion of the characteristic is no longer a straight line and hence cannot be utilized. So the frequency of the wave is given by the reciprocal of your time constant, which elapses between your two waves. So given here the frequency, so this is equivalent to 1 all over the time constant. So we have here an example of a UJT sawtooth generator. Okay, so it consists of a power source. So we have here your power source. So this is your power source. So we have here your power source. We have your UJT. So this is our symbol for UJT or unijunction transistor. Okay, so this is a type of a thyristor or a semiconductor device wherein it has an emitter. So look at the symbol for your emitter with the arrow, and then it has two bases. So instead of having base collector and emitter, unijunction transistors, it also has three terminals. However, the three terminals are composed of an emitter and two bases. So we call this B1 and B2 for base 1 and base 2. Okay, so this consists of a power source. Here is our power source. This is our UJT, and we have your RC network. So we have here your RC network. Okay, so what happens when your switch here is initially closed? A small current is set up. So a small current is set up through R2. So this is our R2 and R1. Okay, via base 2 and base 1. And an initial reverse bias is established across the emitter and our base 1. At the same time, your C, okay, so where is our C? Your C here begins to get charged through RE, so it is charging through RE, and voltage across it increases exponentially. So this is the exponential change in our voltage with respect to time towards target voltage V. Okay, so when your capacitor voltage is equal to the emitter firing or peak point voltage or VP, okay? So your EB1 junction becomes forward bias. So initially, a while ago, this is reverse biased. However, when the capacitor starts on charging, the reverse bias condition here will be changed to forward biased as the emitter goes into negative region of its characteristic. Okay? So being forward biased, the emitter base 1 junction offers very low resistance. So therefore, your C starts discharging through B1 and R1 at a rate determined mainly by the emitter base 1 junction resistor and R1. So as capacitor voltage approaches 0, again, your EB1 junction becomes reverse bias and thus stop conducting again. And then we revert to the initial state where C begin to charge again, and the whole cycle of circuit action is just being repeated. Okay, so your VE here, the voltage across your capacitor here rises exponentially towards the target voltage but drops to a very low value, okay, but drops to a very low value after it reaches the value VP due to the sudden conduction of our emitter to base 1 junction. Since RE is large, so usually the value for RE is 10 kilo ohms or so, your charging rate is comparatively slow, but discharging is much quicker since R1 is very, very small compared to RE. So if RE is in terms of 10 kilo ohms or more, your R1 here is very small in a range of 50 ohms or less. So the slow charge and fast discharge produces our sawtooth wave. So the time required for VE to rise to VP is equivalent to T multiplied by KRE multiplied by C. So this is our time constant, R and E. The combination of R and C here, where K is log to the base E of 1 all over 1 minus this symbol, wherein this is the intrinsic standoff ratio. So the intrinsic standoff ratio depends on the type of UJT that you're going to make use. Okay, so RB1 and RB2 are interbias resistor of our UJT. So the frequency of oscillation of UJT or of the output sawtooth wave is simply 1 all over T or simply 1 all over KRE multiplied by C. So your RC combination here is your time constant. So we have here a triangular wave oscillator. So this is under what we have discussed previously when we discussed your operational amplifier. So op-amp integrator. When you make use of an op-amp integrator, the output is somewhat forming a triangular wave. Okay, so therefore, an op-amp integrator is also a type of an oscillator circuit that produces a triangular waveform. Okay, so basic triangular wave oscillator. So this is dual polarity. Switched input is used. Okay, so the switch is used only to introduce the concept. Okay, so it is not a practical way to implement this circuit. So at position 1, okay, so here at position 1, the negative voltage is applied and the output is a positive going ramp. Okay, so at position 1, the output is a positive going ramp. Okay, so if you're going to remember your discussion, your video regarding the operational amplifier, when our switch is placed at position B or position 2, a negative going ramp is produced. Okay, so this is your position 1, this is your position 2, this is your position 1, and so on. Okay, so by alternating, okay, so if the switch is being thrown back and forth at a fixed interval, therefore we will be getting an output which is a triangular wave consisting of alternating positive going and negative going ramps. So this is one way of producing triangular wave. Okay, so we have practical triangular wave oscillator. So this utilizes an op-amp comparator. So we have already discussed comparator before to perform the switching function. Okay, so for the operation, assume that the output voltage of the comparator is at its maximum negative. Okay, so for example, this is your comparator output. Okay, so assume that the output voltage of the comparator is at its maximum negative level. So its output is connected to an inverting input of the integrator through R1, producing a positive going ramp on the output of the integrator. So positive going ramp on the output of the integrator. When the ramp voltage, okay, so when the ramp voltage reaches the upper triangular point or the UTP, so this is our UTP, the comparator switches to its maximum positive level. So this position level causes the integrator ramp to change to a negative going direction. This one. Okay, so we have the LTP is the lower. The ramp continues in this direction until the lower trigger point or LTP of the comparator is being reached. So it is just like the one we introduced a while ago on the previous slide. The difference is that on the previous slide, we make use of a switch, which is not practical because switch is a mechanical component. Okay, so instead of using a switch, so that we can have a positive and negative going ramp, so we make use of a comparator circuit instead of using a switch. Okay, so the ramp continues in this direction until the lower trigger point of the comparator is reached. So at this point, the comparator output switches back to the maximum negative level and the cycle repeats. Okay? So since the comparator produces a square wave output, so we have here for negative maximum, zero output, positive output, Vmax, and so on. So since the comparator produces a square wave output, the circuit can be used as both a triangular wave oscillator and a square wave oscillator. So we already have two different types of relaxation oscillator in one. Okay, so in our laboratory we have function generators. So function generators produces more than one output function. So this is already considered as a function generator because in one practical application, a square wave and a triangular waveform is being produced. Okay, so we have here a sawtooth voltage controlled oscillator or VCO. So one way to build VCO is using PUT. Okay, so PUT is a programmable unijunction transistor. So a PUT is composed of an anode, a cathode, and a gate. Okay, so a relaxation oscillator whose frequency can be changed by a variable DC voltage. So it can either be a sinusoidal or a non-sinusoidal oscillator. So an op-amp integrator that uses a switching device such as PUT in parallel with a feedback capacitor to terminate each ramp at a prescribed level and effectively reset the circuit. Okay, so as I mentioned a while ago, PUT stands for Programmable UJT or Programmable Unijunction Transistor. So a PUT is made up of an anode, cathode, and a gate terminal. So the gate terminal is always biased positively with respect to the cathode. Okay, so when the anode voltage exceeds the gate voltage by approximately 0.7 volts, the PUT turns on and acts as a forward bias diode. So when anode voltage fall below this level, the PUT turns off. Okay, so PUT is just like a simple diode. Also, the current must be above the holding value to maintain conduction. So these are some examples, okay? So this is our symbol for a PUT. So initially, the capacitor charges, the output ramp begins, and the PUT is off. Okay? So in this figure, the capacitor rapidly discharges when the PUT momentarily turns on. So input voltage V in. So your V in here produces a positive going ramp at the output. So during the time that the ramp is increasing, the circuit acts as a regular integrator. So the PUT triggers on when the output ramp at the anode, so this is still our anode, this is still our cathode, and this is our gate, okay? So exceeds the gate voltage by 0.7. The gate is set to approximate desired sawtooth peak voltage. So when the PUT turns on, the capacitor rapidly discharges. So this here in figure B, okay. So the capacitor does not discharge completely to zero because of the PUT's forward voltage. Okay, so we have here the forward voltage of your PUT. Okay, so discharge continues until the PUT current falls below the holding value. At this point, the PUT turns off and the capacitor begins to charge again, thus generating a new output ramp. And then the cycle continually repeats, and the resulting output is a repetitive sawtooth waveform. Okay, so PUT, UJTs, those are different types of thyristors that you will be discussing more when you go to your industrial electronics subject. So we have here a square wave oscillator. Okay, so again, a square wave oscillator, the operation is based on the charging and discharging of a capacitor. So the op-amps inverting input, okay, so the op-amps inverting input is the capacitor voltage. So depends on the charging and the discharging of this capacitor here. And the non-inverting input, so this is our non-inverting input, is a portion of the output fed back through resistors R2 and R3. So when the circuit is turned on, the capacitor is uncharged, and thus the inverting input is at 0. This makes the output a positive maximum, and the capacitor begins to charge towards your output voltage through your R1. So when the capacitor voltage reach VC, okay, when the capacitor voltage VC reaches a value equal to the feedback voltage VF on the non-inverting input, the operational amplifier switches to the maximum negative state. Okay, so at this point, the capacitor begins to discharge from VF to negative, from positive VF to negative VF. When the capacitor reaches negative VF, the op-amp switches back to the maximum positive state. This action continues to repeat, and a square wave voltage is obtained. Okay, so when the capacitor is charging, we have a maximum peak output voltage. When the capacitor is discharging, we have a negative maximum voltage, and again charging again positive, discharging negative, and we form a square wave. So this is one way of producing a square wave, thus it is called square wave oscillator. So other types, we have multivibrators. Okay, so multivibrators are useful as pulse generating, storing, and counting circuits. Okay, so we have here two-stage amplifiers with positive feedback from the output of one amplifier to the input of the other. So the output of this one is the input for the second amplifier. So I think the arrow here is somewhat so it should be the output from this one, okay, is the input for the first amplifier. Okay, so this is a two-stage amplifier with positive feedback from the output of one amplifier to the input of the other. So the output of the second amplifier serves as the input of your first amplifier. The output of your first amplifier serves as the input of your second amplifier. So this feedback is supplied in such a manner that one transistor is driven to saturation while the other two cut off. So the two transistors do not both work in a saturation and both in cut-off mode. Instead, if one is saturated, the other one is cut off, and vice versa. Okay, so there are three types of multivibrators. So we have what we call the astable type or the non-driven type. We have the monostable or the driven type. And we have the bistable, which is also a driven type multivibrator. Okay, so driven type is also called triggered oscillators. So we have here a stable multivibrator. So this is what an astable multivibrator looks like. Although these are already in a form of integrated circuit, or this is already inside an IC chip, we can still study, or we can still look beyond what is inside an integrated circuit. So this is how an astable multivibrator looks like. An astable multivibrator is also called free-running relaxation oscillator. So there is no stable state, but we only have two quasi-stable. When we say quasi-stable, half-stable states. And this uses two energy storing elements. So what are those two energy storing elements? Our capacitor C2 here and our capacitor C1 here. Okay, so there are two transistors here between which it keeps on oscillating continuously of its own accord without external excitation. So neither of the two transistors reaches a stable state. So what do we mean by that? When one is on, the other is off, and they continuously switch back and forth at a rate depending on the RC time constant. Okay, so we have your RC time constant here. We have your RC time constant here, okay, in the circuit. So there are two capacitors, which are our storing elements. They are capability of storing charges. So the two transistors here, they are symmetrical in nature. Symmetrical collector coupled a stable multivibrator using two similar transistors. As you can see from the circuit provided, there are two common emitter configuration amplifier stages, each providing feedback to the other. So the output, where is the output for common emitter? The output is at the collector. So if you can see, the collector of your first transistor is connected to the base of your second transistor, which means the output of your Q1 serves as the input for your Q2. Likewise, the output of your second transistor, so the second transistor is the output of your second transistor is at point B, or at the collector portion. As you can see, if we're going to trace that, it is going to the base of your first transistor. And we all know that for common emitters, base is our input terminal. Okay, so we have here two common emitter amplifier stages, each providing feedback, okay, to the other. So because of the very strong feedback signal, the transistors are either saturation or into cutoff. Okay, so when our Q1 is being forward biased, by VCC and R1. Okay, so this is the connection. So the connection for Q1 is your VCC via your R1, while your Q2 is being forward biased by VCC and R2. Okay, so how does this operate? When your Q1 is on, your Q2 is off, and vice versa. So the moment we turn on the switch here, okay, so the moment your switch is turned on, one of this transistor will start conducting before the other does. Although we said earlier that this is somewhat symmetrical, there are no two transistors that are exactly alike. Okay, so one of these two will definitely act faster compared with the other. Okay, so let us say that our Q1 starts conducting. Okay, so when our Q1 starts conducting, that means our Q1 is forward biased. So Q1 falls into saturation while our Q2 is into cut off. Okay, so what happens during saturation? The whole VCC here drops across your RL1. So maximum current during saturation, right? Therefore, your VC1, so this is our VC1 at point A is at 0 voltage potential. Okay, so no more voltage drop here because at saturation, all of your VCC here is already at the RL1. Okay, so that means this is already shorted, and shorted means 0 voltage or ground potential. Okay, so since Q2 is cut off, therefore there conducts no current across our RL2. So since no current across RL2, therefore what is the voltage across your VB? Point B. So this is equivalent to our VCC. Therefore, we have an output here coming from the Q2. So Q1 is the one which is saturated. So the output is coming from the collector of our Q2. So this is 0 volt potential and this is VCC. Okay, this is equivalent to VCC. So since A is 0, your C2 now starts. So since there is a change in potential, okay, so there's a potential difference. Therefore, C2 starts to charge through R2 towards VCC. So when your voltage across C2 rises sufficiently to 0.7, it biases Q2. So since this is already charged and this is connected to your input, so your Q2 now is driven to saturation. So since this is driven to saturation, our VC2 here decreases and almost reaches 0. Okay? So when that happens, Q2 gets saturated and the potential of point B decreases from VCC to 0 or in the negative swing. Okay? So this negative is being applied to our Q1 here, making your Q1 now into cut off. So from Q1, from saturation, it now becomes cut off. Therefore, your VB here is your voltage at point B is equal to 0, and this time your voltage here is equivalent to VCC. But since it is negative going from VCC to 0, we have a negative output here, having an output waveform of a negative waveform. We get that at the output of your Q1. And again, the cycle continues. Okay, so Q1 becomes forward bias again and start conducting, and then Q2 becomes forward bias again and start conducting. So every time our output is at Q2, we have a positive going waveform, and every time our output is at point A, we have a negative going output. So that is how an astable multivibrator functions or acts. Okay, so how fast, or what is the frequency of oscillation, or what is the width of our positive and negative pulses here? Okay, so we call that your switching times. So our T1 here is the off time for Q1, our T2 here is the off time for our Q2. So this is equivalent to 0.69 multiplied by the time constant R1, C1, and this is multiplied by the time constant R2 and C2. So if we wanted to have a square wave, therefore, we will just have the same value for R1 and C1. If we wanted to adjust your mark and space, then we will have some adjustments with our R1 and C1. So the total time period of the wave is just the sum of your T1 and T1, or 1.38 multiplied by RC if we wanted a symmetrical stages. So symmetrical stages will give us a symmetric waveform. So the frequency of oscillation is 1 all over T, or 1 over 1.38 multiplied by RC. Okay, so the minimum value for beta to ensure oscillation is R1 all over RL1, R2 all over RL2, or minimum, if it is symmetrical, is R divided by RL. So if we don't want it to be symmetrical, or we don't want our space and mark to be equal, therefore we can vary the values for our resistors and capacitors. So aside from astable multivibrators, we have monostable multivibrator. So monostable multivibrator is also called single shot or single swing or a one-shot multivibrator. Okay, so it is also called delay multivibrator or univibrator. So it has one absolutely stable state and one quasi-stable state. So it uses an external trigger pulse. So this is our external trigger pulse. So this is our external trigger pulse, and we only have one energy storage element this time, which is our C1. Okay, so Q1 is coupled to the input of our Q2. Okay, so take note, only this portion here has a capacitor which is capable of charging and discharging, and this time your connection here, R1 going to the base of your Q1, is no longer a capacitor. Okay, so in the absence of a triggering pulse at C2 and S is closed, okay, we cannot say that Q1 and Q2 will be alternating. Okay, so it is not possible. Unlike the earlier circuit, Q1 can start conducting, Q2 can start conducting. So in this case, Q2 is always conducting. So why Q2 is always conducting? Q2 is always conducting because of your negative VBB here. So negative VBB here reverse biases your Q1. So this is an NPN transistor. So the base is P-type. And upon placing a negative supply to your P-type, okay, so that automatically reverse biases your Q1. So when this switch closes, automatically your Q2 is the one in saturation. Okay, so since Q2 is in saturation, therefore the output here is equivalent to 0. Okay, so the output here is equivalent to 0, and it will not change unless this capacitor will be charged. And this capacitor will not be charged until we break this negative VBB here. So what breaks this negative VB here? The presence of your trigger pulse. So the trigger pulse must be greater than your negative VBB so that it can forward bias your Q1. So the moment that your Q1 is forward biased, that is the only time that this will be charged, the capacitor will be charged, making this Q2 reverse biased. So when this is reverse biased, we have a output. Okay, and then afterwards, since we don't have a capacitor to maintain that, it will go back to its normal state, which has 0 output. And when will be the output occurring once again? when we produce another pulse here. So that is why it is called a single shot or single swing or one shot multivibrator, because we only have an output every time we have here a triggered pulse. So when there is no triggered pulse here, we expect no output. Okay, so monostable multivibrator is one output, there is a one output pulse for every input trigger pulse it receives. So one shot period. So the width or duration of the pulse is given by 0.69 R1 C1 multiplied by R2, and the frequency of oscillation is equivalent to 1 all over T. Lastly, we have the bistable multivibrator. Okay, so the bistable multivibrator, it has two absolutely stable states. So it can stay in one of its states indefinitely as long as power is supplied, changing to the other state only when it receives a trigger pulse from the outside. So this is also what we call a flip-flop. And this is also called the RS flip-flop. Okay? So if you were going to look at the internal circuit for an RS flip-flop, so it is composed of a bistable multivibrator. Okay, so as you can see, no charging elements, no capacitors included. So the moment our VCC here, the moment our switch here is closed, both of these two transistors are in the reverse bias mode. So why reverse bias mode? Because both of them is being reverse biased by a negative VBB. Okay, so the only time that one of these two transistors will be in saturation mode is when we put trigger either in the reset or in the set. So R is for reset and S is for set. Therefore, only one at a time. Okay, so in RS flip-flop, there is no such thing as 1 and 1. Okay, so it's either 0 or 1 or 1 or 0 or 0, 0. So it is impossible for us to have both 1 for the set and reset. Okay, for a flip-flop. Now, we have here a versatile integrated circuit, okay, with many applications. Okay, so a while ago, we have presented to you an oscillator circuits, and then we have multivibrators. Okay, so all of those can be done by using this versatile integrated circuit. Okay, so this can be configured as an stable or free-running multivibrator, and at the same time, it can also act as a VCO or voltage-controlled oscillator. So what we are talking about is our 555 timer. Okay, so 555 timer as an oscillator. The insides of a 555 timer consists basically of two comparators, a flip-flop, a discharge transistor, and a resistive voltage divider. Okay, so inside a 555 timer. So, depending on what you connect or what you wanted to place on a 555 timer, you can have several applications. So, if we make use of the flip-flop or bistable multivibrator, okay, so it is a digital device, a two-state device whose output can be at either high voltage level, so that is your set, or a low voltage level, that is your reset. Okay, so we also have a resistive voltage divider. So the voltage divider can be used to set the voltage comparator levels, so that you can be setting what would be your maximum voltage, positive or negative, or the minimum voltage required. And then the comparator's outputs can be the control state of the flip-flop. Okay, so it can act as an oscillator, one shot, or as monostable, or a time delay element. So it can also be a timer. So that is how versatile your 555 timer is. So this is the internal diagram and pin configurations for your 555 timer. Okay, so we have your pin 1 as the ground, pin 2 as your trigger. Okay, so as we can see, as we seen on the previous slides, we have a trigger pulse. Okay, so to break your negative VBB. Okay, so that can be placed on our pin number 2. Pin number 3 is for the output. Pin number 4 is for reset. Pin number 5 is control voltage if you wanted to make use of it as your VCO. Pin number 6 is threshold. Pin number 7 is your discharge. And pin number 8 is your VCC. Okay, so all 3 resistors inside. So inside this is within the box. So what you can see only are the pins outside your 555 timer. So all 3 resistors are of equal value. Okay, so the upper comparator has a reference of 2/3. So the upper comparator has a reference of 2/3 of VCC, and the lower comparator has a reference of 1/3 VCC. Okay, so it can be used as an oscillator or a one-shot multi-vibrator. So a stable operation, free running relaxation oscillator, the threshold input, okay, so this is your threshold input, is connected to the trigger input. So pin number 6 and pin number 2 are shorted. R1, R2, and C extension, okay, so R1, R2, and your C extension forms the timing circuit, okay, so that you can design what is the width and what is the mark and what is the space of the pulse or the rectangular or the square wave that you want to produce. So you place it here, okay, so R1 and R2 and C extension, capacitor extension form the timing circuit that sets the frequency of oscillation. Okay, so this is what you do or what you connect in our 555 timer for it to operate as a free running relaxation oscillator. Okay, so if we wanted it to have an output of a square wave just like this one, so we have here your trigger. Okay, so we placed your trigger here. So this is your comparator when it reaches 2/3 of your VCC, so that is the upper portion of your comparator. So therefore we reach your positive Vmax here, and if it is 1/3 of your VCC, that is your lower portion of your comparator, we get an output here which is equivalent to a negative or minimum voltage. So at the output, we form a square wave. Okay, so the timing circuits, so the formula depends on your R1 and R2 and your C extension. So you can make use of the 555 timer of the design. So you can make your own design. You can adjust the width of your pulses, okay, by following the values of R1, R2, and the capacitor that you have. Okay, so for the duty cycle, it depends on the value of R1, R2 that you will be using. Okay, so the duty cycle is regarding the widths of your square wave. So this is also one way. Okay, so this is also one way of designing. So the trigger, instead of using your trigger or your discharge, so you can make use of a diode here. Okay. And lastly, same external connections for a stable, with the exception that a variable control voltage so is applied to input number 5. Okay, so control voltage is being applied to input number 5, okay? So, if we do this, we still have a output of like this. So, a while ago, we have seen a circuit that produces an output depending on the charging and the discharging of capacitor. So, in terms of 555 timer, it depends on the 2/3 and 1/3 of your VCC. Okay, so at the same time, it will be having, our output will be what? Somewhat a square wave. Okay, so this is operating as a VCO. Although we have a controlled voltage here, voltage controlled oscillator. Okay, so that's our last topic for oscillators. Thank you.